research culture. Leanne, thank you very much. The webinar is yours.
Thank you very much, James. And thank you very much for the kind introduction. Just loading up.
There you go.
So as James said, I'm going to talk about how I've gone about building a healthy research culture in my team and really beyond, how it infiltrates the rest of the building. Again, this is from my own personal experience, and I appreciate there's many ways to do this, but this is what has worked for me and has, I guess, come from, I'm going to give you how I've come about to do this. So firstly, I'd like to say, I think there should be ups and downs in what we do, because if there aren't, we aren't really alive. So we do need the ups and downs to appreciate, I guess, the good with the bad. And changing research culture is very much an ultra marathon and beyond. It's the small steps that we're taking in a very long road. So I'm not saying that I have built the best research culture, but I am taking steps towards things that I believe are good for my team. So just a little bit about me so you can understand where I've come from in this. So I'm a Kiwi, and you may hear that from my accent. I came from New Zealand, and in 2004, I got a career development fellowship that I then hopped on a plane and traveled for a day and 3 hours to the other side of the world. At this time, I knew one person in London, and that was a friend of mine who was not in science. I came over to work with Professors Keith Frayne and Frederick Carper as a postdoc research fellow, and this was a photo of me in 2005 with the group as a very, I guess, young, naive postdoc. And this is me now. I am the Professor of Metabolic Physiology and a BHF Senior Research Fellow in Basic Science, and this is some of my group. So my group has oscillated between the sizes of, well, 1 when I was initially starting out, but on average we're between 8 and 10, and the biggest it was at 14, which personally I found quite overwhelming. I do other things in the university. I chair and sit on committees, including graduate studies committee. So some of the things that I've changed in how I run my research group have come out of what I've heard graduate students say. I'm very passionate about career development, and so I chair and initiated the career development committee in the department. And I'm also on the research staff advisory group, because I do think we need to think about how we develop careers and people. The other thing that's been really instrumental in how I do things, and I didn't realize this until recently, is I reflected on why I do certain things. My group made me reflect when they put me up for an award on how I run my group and maybe why I do it that way. And I've been involved in the sport of rowing for over 30 years. And last year I was very kindly asked to be the chair of the Oxford University Women's Boat Club. And that's been a very different role and a very interesting role, but it's nice to watch young women be athletic scholars. So this has underpinned very much how I run my group. So in rowing, when I started out, I watched the Olympics and I told my parents as a 15-year-old girl, I'm going to row. And my expectation after watching the Olympics was I was going to be in an 8, I was going to go down a straight line, and I was going to go fast. The reality was I rowed for 2 years. I didn't grow any taller, so I ended up coxing. I was not a rower. And I suddenly had to learn to navigate very windy rivers, because New Zealand has a lot of those, very crowded rivers, which Oxford has a lot of those, and also things that pop up unexpectedly. In science, I also, when I first started out as an undergrad, all I heard about were all these great things. You got papers and you could get awards and you could become a professor, and you did experiments. And I thought, oh, that's quite easy, isn't it? And it would be a very, again, straightforward trajectory. Again, reality, when you get in amongst it, you suddenly realize it's not like that. There's a lot of twists and turns, and it's a bit more chaotic than what you maybe realize, and unexpected things happen. So there's an expectation of what we come into, and then the reality of what we have. So everyone makes this expectation of my career when they hear that I now run a research group in Oxford. And the assumption is very much, I went to high school, I then went and did an undergraduate degree, did a PhD, postdoc, intermediate fellowship, and then senior fellowship, or was a lecturer, senior lecturer, and then professor. And this is what you see on a lot of university websites, is this linear trajectory down the bottom here. But this is actually my path into research. I didn't like high school. I hated it, in fact. I left high school when I was 17 years old, so I never finished high school, and it meant I couldn't go to university. And my parents had a very, they told us basically we weren't allowed to leave school unless we had a job. So I found myself a job, and I've worked many jobs. I've worked in pubs, I've worked in the hospitality industry, horticulture, and I was involved in rowing, and that's all I wanted to do at that time. And in New Zealand, they set up sports medicine, and there was a night school course, and I went and did it. And suddenly some bells went off. I became very interested in sports nutrition. So I managed to get myself to university because I hadn't gone straight through high school. It was a wee bit more complicated, but eventually I got to university, and I had a bit of a panic attack after my first year, thinking I couldn't do it. I actually wasn't capable of doing it. So I took a year off, I worked 3 jobs, and then I came back and decided to finish my degree. From there, I did my PhD, and then I didn't come straight into research. I worked as a teaching fellow, which I did actually during my PhD, and I stayed on as a teaching fellow. And then it became slightly more linear. I then came and got a career development fellowship, which brought me to Oxford, and then I got my intermediate fellowship and my senior fellowship. I'd like to point out I actually spent a long time, 12 years, working in a pub, so I have excellent backup skills in case science ever fell over. Within my time in that slightly more linear part of my career here, where I was going a wee bit more straightforward, it wasn't straightforward. It took me 2.5 years to publish my first paper in Oxford. I had one paper that was rejected 8 times, but I got it published on the 9th submission. And like anyone in academia, I've had grant applications, some successful, a lot more are not successful. And I never had a career plan until probably about 5 years ago. So I never anticipated coming to university and running a research group. So like I said, rowing and research have a lot of similarities. We see all the good things, we see the successes, we see what people do. That's what we talk about. That's always the headline in the paper or in the newsletter you get from your department saying who got the accolades, what papers have been published. And all the bits we don't see and the things we don't talk about are the bits I'm quite passionate about. We don't talk about what it takes to maybe get that success, however we measure success. So in the academic world, it could be disappointments. We have good habits of coming to work regularly, doing long hours. We're dedicated to doing good science. We have persistence. I had persistence in getting my paper that was rejected from 8 different journals published in the 9th journal. But we don't talk about that. We talk about the bits of the outcomes when it happens. I got my paper. In rowing, you don't see the cold, frosty mornings when you are freezing. As a coxswain, you don't move, so you freeze. You're like a little ice block when you come back in after training. You can get wet, and this is the worst place you could ever be in a race, 4th, pipped at the post for a medal. But we don't talk about that. We focus on those successes. So what has rowing taught me that I've now brought into science and how I run my group? Well, I learned very early on that actually I coxed 8s and 4s. And so if we think of an 8, it's 8 individuals in a boat, but actually plus a coxswain, so it's a 9. But to be part of that crew or team, you need a basic set of skills. So if we take the 8 up here, what you can't have is this person here not knowing how to row because the boat just won't move. And all 8 rowers contribute in their own way. So I need to acknowledge them equally. No one is better than anyone else. So to be part of a team, you need a basic set of skills to feel like you're part of a team. A very wise rowing coach told me, we need to focus on the process, Leanne. The outcomes take care of themselves. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he made a very good point. Focus on what I could control. I can control how well my boat goes. I can control how well those rowers synchronize what they're doing, but I can't control what other boats on the water are doing. So it was about focusing on what I could do and not worrying about what I couldn't do. So I didn't know how fast those other boats were going, and I didn't know how well they'd race. I only knew how good my crew was. So now it's focus on what I can do and not what I can't control. I learned very quickly as a coxswain, I could not have long rambling sentences. I had to have very clear and constructive, transparent communication. So I couldn't come up with some wordy thing for them to make them go faster. I needed short, sharp, direct words. So I believe that clear, constructive, transparent communication is really important. I learned there's 8 individuals. They all have personalities, and some of them have very interesting and challenging personalities that maybe don't gel with mine, but that's okay. You have to respect and trust people, but you have to earn that respect and trust. It cannot be expected. And you don't have to be friends with everyone, but you must respect what they bring to the boat and treat them how you wanted to be treated. You need to be adaptable. Crews can change, conditions can change, situations may change. So it was learning not to get too used to the routine. You couldn't get complacent. It was about always trying to get better. And it was about not dwelling on disappointments, because otherwise that would come to the next row and the next outing, and everyone would be in a slump where really you needed to be back up working towards that goal. I learned that sharing a workload is for a common purpose and vision is more productive. It's great fun. And actually competition is best placed against other crews, not within the crew. So once you've got your 9 individuals in a crew, you want them to collaborate to make that boat go faster. You don't want them to be at competition with each other. You want them to encourage and bring up the weakest rowers. That's fantastic, but it's not to try and show them up, it's to actually improve them. And really, people can go beyond what they think they can with the right encouragement and support. And I say that quite genuinely, because I've been in races that I've been coxing and they've been neck to neck, and I've been able to manage to say the right words at the right time, and people who are exhausted can still lift themselves up and get ahead and do well. And small changes in a boat wobbles a lot, and if you can get 8 people to synchronize, taking small changes to make those 8 people synchronize can have a really large impact on how the boat feels and how fast it goes. So how I used my words and how I got people to make those changes was really important, but it could have a really large impact. So what have I learned from my own personal challenges? And this is mainly from the academic side. When I came over here, and even when I was doing my PhD, I've reflected back on what I've learned, I guess, from all my challenges. So one of them is I had a lot of self-doubt, particularly coming over to Oxford. I felt I wasn't clever enough. Going on to do my PhD, I honestly thought I wasn't good enough to do a PhD. And really, why would I apply for fellowships? They were just going to say no. So I felt like I didn't fit in, didn't think my career is successful, and I felt like a fraud or failure. And I'm sure many people feel like this, and I know they do. I speak to them a lot. And when I first came to Oxford, I really did feel like I didn't fit in, and I kind of was the square peg trying to fit in a round hole. And I thought with a proper diet and consistent exercise and the development of the right mindset, I should be able to fit in fine. So I spent probably the first year feeling like that when I came to Oxford. And actually what I realized was good mentors are really important. I was very lucky to have 2 very good mentors in New Zealand, and this is Keith Frayne, who I came to work with. This is Stephanie Foster, who was a rowing coach, and Fred Strawn. Again, I've learned valuable lessons from them all, but they were really key in making me realize that actually I was good enough to do this and I could do it. I've now realized imposter syndrome is normal, and we shouldn't make me feel like imposters, but we do it to ourselves a lot of the time, or the words we hear, but it's actually fine. And not fitting in the expected blueprint makes me unique, and it makes me me. And I gave a talk a couple of years ago, and I put up more or less my career path that I showed you, and someone said to me at the end, would I change my CV if I could? And I said, actually, no, because that is my CV, and that's what makes me me. And we should be proud of it, and we should really be talking about what our CVs look like and what makes us unique. I think we need to be honest about experiences. I'm sure you would all talk to people and you say, how's it going? And it's always fine or great. And it can't be great 100% of the time. It just can't be. We have days where it's not so good, and that's okay. But I think it's good that we start normalizing how we talk about things. I'm having a bad day, absolutely fine. I'm having a good day, great. But I went through a phase, and I'll show you why, that I found it very hard, and I was very honest with my group why I found it hard. Again, I think it's really important to set your own goals and goalposts. When I first came over here, again, Oxford was this big university, and I believed I wasn't good enough, and that's because I looked at what everyone else was doing. And I realized that I needed to set my own goalposts and my own things I wanted to achieve. Comparison really is the thief of all joy. And the moment I stopped comparing myself to other people, I really started enjoying my work instead of worrying about, was I going to achieve anything? And that's what I try and do within my group. I try and let them see that actually what they are doing is their own journey. It's not mine. I'm prepared to support it, but it's their own journey and they need to be proud of it. I think small words have big impact. And the one thing I really don't like in academia is this talk of academic failure. And when you look up what failure means, it means lack of success. And I guess in terms of academia, we're talking about outcomes like grants or papers or experiments. And I think actually getting to write a grant or a paper in itself, getting some pilot data, is a success. So what I have learned is actually there is no such thing as failure. Only organs fail. I work in the area of liver metabolisms. Liver metabolism. Livers fail. So there are only disappointments, challenges, and hurdles, and we learn from them. And I actually asked my group not to use the word failure because I think it's quite negative. Disappointments, and that's absolutely fine. And we have a 24-hour rule in my group. If we get a disappointment, you've got 24 hours to feel sorry for yourself, and then you pick yourself up and carry on because there are bigger things in life to get worried about. We also spend a lot of time, a rowing coach told me this, and it's so true after we got pipped at the post in a race. He said, why is it we spend probably 4 times more time dwelling on the disappointment, which is usually an outcome, rather than celebrating the steps in the process? We should have celebrated the fact we made the final. We should have celebrated the fact we had an excellent race. Like we should celebrate the fact with our students and our postdocs and our RAs that we've got data that we're proud of and that contributes to science. And yes, it doesn't go into the journal we ideally want, but actually it still goes into a journal. So we celebrate the steps in the process. I've also learned that academic careers are complicated, hard to navigate, and not transparent. And I genuinely, when I came over here, had no idea how you even make it up the ladder in an academic career. And part of this happened, when this happens, when you don't know where you're going. I personally went through this. I felt very isolated. I was very overwhelmed at times, and I felt like I was going around in circles a lot. I actually didn't know where I was going and how I was going to get there. It was all quite confusing. So I think this is where expectation comes in. We need to understand how we can give people the transparent information. So transparency and honesty about career progression, pathways, routes is required. And I think we need to reinforce to people there is no one right way of doing this or right timeline. A lot of fellowships, yes, they say 6 years postdoc, but sometimes people aren't up to the fellowships, and fellowships aren't for everyone, and they shouldn't be for everyone. So we need to talk about how people can contribute to science in different ways, and people do it in fantastic ways. But we all get a bit hung up on that. We see someone that got a fellowship and they've made professor or whatever it is, and actually that's not for everyone. We need to tailor what we tell people, and it needs to be clear about how they're going to develop their career. I think I learned that I needed to be proactive. You have to take a bit of ownership and responsibility for your own career and what you're doing, and get advice. When you ask people, they're prepared to help most of the time. I think the key is to find people who are honest, constructive, and you trust. And you have to listen to what is being said. If you're asking someone's opinion, you need to listen to what they're telling you, even if you don't want to hear it. And I remember writing my first fellowship, my first ever fellowship over here, and I gave it to Keith. And I still remember him saying, "Oh, Leanne, I'm sorry to say, it's not good news. It's not quite up to spec." And it wasn't. But actually, I'm pleased he told me that rather than saying, "Good job," because I went away then knowing that I needed to, and he was prepared to help me, but knowing I need to improve what I did. So honesty is key, and actually telling someone constructively is a good thing. You want them to be competitive, so there's no point in underselling them. I think peer mentoring and support is important at all levels, and I look at my peers and I use them a lot, and you suddenly realize what you're feeling and how it's going is completely normal. They've all experienced it. Yes isn't the right answer all the time. I've said yes a number of times, particularly early on, thinking I need to say yes, or they won't let me, I'm not doing the right thing. And it turned out to be not the right answer. So I'm very measured in my response now if I take things on. And I think be prepared to take opportunities that feel like a risk. I took a risk coming over here, knowing one individual, and I must say it's been one of the best decisions I made. Oh, life happens. Life makes work and careers very complicated. They overlap a lot. Personal life and work life overlap, and they can influence how you see and feel about things. And I'm just going to give you an example of that, of my own experience, because it really does cloud how you view things. So career success in my book doesn't equal personal happiness. And here I've got a graph down the bottom. I've got how I was feeling and if I was happy or sad, and what the achievements or success were. And these are esteemed markers that we use in academia to say you've done well. So in 2011, I got my first fellowship, which I should have been very happy about. And everyone kept on saying to me, oh, you're happy. And I personally, they could have taken it, had it back. I didn't really care. And the reason being was my family's in Christchurch, and there was the earthquake in Christchurch. My grandfather lost his house and my family had their life turned upside down. My grandmother, who I was very close to, also was diagnosed terminally ill and died. So everyone here thought I should have been delighted. And yes, I was happy, but it wasn't a big deal for me getting that fellowship compared to what was happening personally. Again, in 2014, I got the associate professor title. People wondered why I wasn't very happy about it. And it's because my grandfather, who I was exceptionally close to, was diagnosed terminally ill and passed away. 2015 was a good year, got my senior fellowship. 2016, I got more funding. It was a real mixed emotions year. My dad died suddenly. I had an expansion in my group, and really it became quite overwhelming. And then in 2018, I got my professor title, and there's been mixed emotions ever since, with people passing, getting sick, and also having expansion of group and becoming a bit overwhelming. So just because someone's putting on a smiley face, or when you say to them, how are they? And they say, fine, don't forget there's probably there could be something happening in their own personal life that they maybe don't want to speak about, and that's okay. But maybe they just aren't as enthusiastic as you think they should be because there's other stuff happening. And because of this overlap, I think we just need to be mindful at times that life happens. So what's the ethos of my group? This is my group. I made them go onto Zoom and so I could get a photo, because it's how we've been doing everything, obviously, for the last few months. We all feel we're in it together. So the individuals in my group have their own objectives, and it depends on their career stage and their future goals. And I try and tailor that so it's helpful to them. We have very clear, open, non-judgmental and respectful communication. We don't just send emails, we actually talk to each other where possible. We have a recognition of expertise and appreciation of diversity. So Joe is a DPhil student in my group, and his background prior to coming to do his PhD is he was a, it's just gone out my head, built bridges. He's got a very interesting background. Again, we utilize his knowledge in engineering. So it's fun. Sean has done a lot of work with younger people in terms of their development. So again, we utilize his expertise. None of my group over the years, and these are people that have worked with me over the years as well, have taken themselves too seriously. They're willing to share and laugh about mistakes and mishaps. So we're very open. When things go a bit wrong, we talk about them openly. We're accommodating and supportive of each other, particularly in challenging times. And there's this individual, John, was a clinical training fellow in my group. And very sadly, his dad got terminally ill near the end of his degree. And we all pitched in and helped him so his lab work didn't fall behind and he could finish on time. It's a team effort. Everyone's willing to help regardless of whether they personally receive any benefit or not. So they're not in it for just the benefit, they're in it to help people. There's always someone you can go to for help, and no problem is seen as trivial. They're very proud and passionate about their work and that of others. And they're very enthusiastic of others' achievements and work. And I tell you, that's really infectious and inspiring and motivational. And it goes both ways. Them of me, and I'm very proud of them, but their excitement for the data is very infectious to me. So we have this nice way of elevating and lifting each other up. So how have I managed to achieve this? Well, Everyone knows what the outcomes are. We know they have to write theses or get papers or get grants, but actually we focus on the processes to get them there. And it's about developing these people as they go through those processes. The outcomes take care of themselves. The paper will be published somewhere, maybe not the first picked journal, but that's okay. Expectations are clearly set between all parties, and sometimes it's 3 of us or more, but we all know what we expect of each other. We're encouraged, all of us, I do it myself, we keep revisiting expectations, outcomes, goals. Everything moves, it's not a stagnant thing. We learn to navigate disappointments, challenges, and setbacks. We build resilience and learn adaptability, the 24-hour rule. And it's quite funny, now it happens when someone gets a paper that's rejected, I hear someone else say to them, "Oh, you got 24 hours. We try and keep it in perspective because life's too short. So when I was having my family, the losses of my family, my group were very supportive. I was honest with them why maybe I wasn't as buoyant, or I felt I couldn't commit as much to supporting them as I maybe could have. But I was very honest, and they know that life's too short and we make the most of it. So we work hard, we're proud of our science, but we also take time to spend time with family and friends or whatever matters to us. We celebrate the points in the process, so all the small stuff. We celebrate when a paper's submitted. We celebrate when someone's done their transfer of status. We celebrate when at the end of a project, so we have data that we can actually then write up. Everyone leads by example, and that really feeds into the wider environment of our building and beyond. So my group treat people with respect. They ask people how they are. And actually that starts feeding into the bigger environment. So they start having this snowball effect and initiating change. They know it's healthy to disagree with me. It's done in a non-confrontational manner, but we do have good discussions about really, is that the right interpretation, or is that the right method to use? You know, just because I'm a bit more senior than them doesn't mean I'm right. And we're very much based on looking for solutions to the problems. We don't whinge about things. We come in and we try and solve it through looking at the many ways a problem could be solved. And as I said, we talk openly about challenges, mistakes, and how it's going. So for example, during COVID, I would have a Zoom session where actually nobody was allowed to talk science. They had to tell me how they were and what they've been watching and how hard it is. And I was quite open with them, how hard I found writing during that time. I was trying to renew my senior fellowship and it was very hard work, but I was very open about that. So what are my final thoughts? Well, I think building a healthy research culture is a process. There is absolutely nothing, it's not a given. It's very ongoing. It's not something you get and you have. It's something that's ongoing. It takes time and it cannot be taken for granted because the people in your lab change, the people in your group change. Someone could be having a bad day and that somehow infiltrates the rest of the group. It's something that you cannot be complacent about. It relies on clear, constructive, and transparent communication. It really is built on respect, trust, and honesty. And it encourages people to talk and not whinge, to actively pursue solutions. And people are encouraged to have difficult conversations. They're not nice, but they are important. We acknowledge the work and personal life overlap, and it's making sure you give people enough time to the things that matter. We take responsibility for our actions and words. I would really like it if people could stop using the word failure, because none of us fail. And we have to remember, particularly as PIs, it's not all about us. If we didn't have the people around us, we wouldn't have data to go and present at conferences. So it is about a team, in my opinion. And small changes can have a really large impact, and they go beyond the smaller group. So we have coffee each day at 11, obviously not during current times, but we used to go out and have coffee and it was informal, and if people can make it, that's great. But then other people from other groups start popping in, sitting down with us so we can chat to them. So it does go beyond my group, it goes into the larger group. We learn from challenges, disappointments, and successes, and I think there's a lot to be learned from, particularly disappointments. And maybe we don't take enough time to reflect on what we've learned from our successes. And I really do think it's collaborative and not competitive. And it's productive, and importantly, it's fun. There was a nice 30-second speech that was done by Brian Dyson, who was a former CEO of Coca-Cola. And basically it says that we're juggling 5 balls: work, family, health, friends, and spirit. And really, if one of those balls is the rubber one, that's work. The rest of them could be glass. And if we do drop them, we can damage them. So really, it's keeping in perspective that work's really important. And yes, we do get stuck in our own little bubbles and it becomes all consuming. But I think we need to take a step back and remember there's more to life than just work, and work will bounce back. And I'm just going to leave you with a really nice Maori proverb that I wholeheartedly believe. And it says, what is the most, I'm not going to say it in Maori because my Maori's very, very out of touch, but what is the most important thing in the world? It is people, it is people, it is people. Thank you.
Leanne, thank you very much. It was really interesting and very inspiring. It's great to hear both the journey of a researcher doesn't have to follow the somewhat stereotypical career path and can in fact be enriched by doing things differently. And I say that as someone who certainly hasn't followed the career path. I'm not sure I followed much of a career path at all. And also to hear about not just your own story, but also the practical ways you manage to kind of capture that healthy research culture and take practical steps to make it happen, and be perhaps somewhat evangelical with those in your team so they not only benefit from that culture themselves, perhaps go away and spreading it. And that perhaps leads to a first question which I'll put. Have you managed to kind of, you and your people managed to kind of influence other groups within your university, either within the same faculty or possibly even further afield in different subject areas? Because I think, I say as someone from the arts and humanities, what obviously you're from a particular discipline, but I think what you're talking about is something that's relevant pretty much to any discipline of research and any type of research environment.
Yeah, so we haven't gone further than, so people in my group, as part of the chair of the Career Development Committee, we felt particularly research staff were underrepresented in our bigger department. So what we did is we set up the Researcher Association, and actually 2 members of my group are now sitting on that association and have come up with ideas on how to bring in other people and things they can do to support people in the wider in the wider department. So our department's split across 3 sites, which makes it very difficult. So within our building, our group has a large infiltration, and for no other reason than they talk to people. You know, it's the small things of going past and saying, good morning, how are you? They speak to people, and It's not a conversation. It's sometimes just a good morning or thank you or have a nice day. And that has a large impact because sometimes that's all people need to hear if they're having a bad day, is someone's just engaged with them. So they're very good at doing that. In the wider university, we are at the bigger level of, we're in the Radcliffe Department of Medicine. So they do make sure that they take their ethos and talk about it openly. So it becomes, I don't like to say the new norm, but it becomes something more acceptable that they're not scared to talk about, you know, I broke the column. One of them turned up to my door the other day saying, I've broken the combustion column. And I just sat there and laughed. I mean, what was it going to do? And it was no big deal. So, and they know it's not a big deal. And it's actually, then other people will come and say to me, oh, you didn't seem worried about it. I was like, well, I make mistakes. Why am I going to sit there and say, you can't make mistakes? It's hypocritical. So they are slowly infiltrating. They like the fact that they go out and raise this banner that they're a happy, productive group.
Thank you. Okay, we've had a couple of questions come in. One, what do you do if not every team member buys into the acting respectfully ethos? Challenging colleagues in my team will barely raise their head when someone new walks in.
So can I say, I don't employ, just for the get-go, I don't employ people who are necessarily like everyone else in my group. We do have a diverse set of personalities. But the one thing I won't do is take on a student or a staff member. There's 2 things they have to do. Obviously, I talk to them about the expectations I have before I will employ anyone. So they know from the get-go what the expectation is, that there are certain things. And one of them is that they will be part of a team and do a certain number of things. But I also make them talk to a person or two out of my group that I don't know what that conversation's about, but they need to understand if they're coming into the group, how the group runs from the group's perspective. Because I can sit there as a PI and go, oh yes, it's a great group, we're highly productive, we do X, Y, and Z. And then I'm sure everyone's got colleagues like this. Then the person comes along and it's a completely different way or different expectation than what the person thought they were coming to. And I've had people in the building coming to talk to me because when they joined a different group, they said, I thought I was coming into this, but now I've got this. So I think we have had people that we haven't had people that don't buy into it. They think they won't, but actually once they get into it, they do. They've never worked in an environment, was a comment from one of them, and said, I've never worked in an environment like that. And I said, well, that's fine. Try it. If it's not for you, it's not for you. That's also fine. Be respectful of it.
I think that's a very good ethos. Thank you. Okay, we've got a couple of other questions. And we've got a few more minutes to do that. Okay. Mark Taylor Art says, you haven't spoken much about the support you expect from your university in these efforts. And he's asking this because there seems to be wide variations in universities' sense of fostering a healthy research environment and, as well as sponsoring actual research projects.
Yep. So the university, Oxford's last year, I think, got I think they call them a research staff advocate to career development. So because of the Concordat, Oxford's now gone into, we need to start developing our people and how they're going to do it. And at the moment, I'm sitting on one of the research staff working group. And I guess I've learnt with Oxford, there's a lot of talk and a lot of meetings, but the actions may be a wee bit slower than what I personally would like. So it is very small steps. So Oxford is trying to make small changes, but I feel like it's a wee bit box ticky at the moment, whereas I would sign up to doing things that I believe I can. It may take a while, but I can do and we should do rather than just being box ticky. So the university is supportive in principle. It's getting the right people that will, I guess, push it a wee bit harder. Until the grant funding bodies sign up to it, I think it's going to be even harder.
Sure, I get.
There's got to be something harder with it.
Okay, a question. If you had researchers who want to build this kind of collegiate supportive atmosphere, but their PI, the team leader, people who perhaps set the tone a bit more than most, well, that they do, isn't into this sort of thing or potentially actively hostile to this sort of thing, what would your tips be to people in that sort of situation? What can they do?
I think you can create your own support network and you can change what's around you. So it's the immediate change. And yes, PIs don't buy into it, and I get that. What I do is my own personal way, and it works for me, and I'm comfortable with it. I get PIs do it very differently, but equally, sometimes PIs aren't that engaged with their group. So actually, you can build your own group around it, and you can find your peers, not only in your own group, but in other groups, where you can have a good support network around you. Yes, it's very hard to change, but you can change the immediate space. And that happened in one of the groups here. They actually found by talking to each other, because they'd sort of been set up in a more competitive environment. But once we got them talking to each other, they realized they had safety in numbers. So they could talk to each other and they all understood the situation rather than one person feeling very isolated by it. So it is a case of sometimes just taking baby steps, and sometimes it's making the PI think it was their idea. Dare I say it?
I like that. I like that idea a lot. That's brilliant. Okay, a couple more questions before we move on to Casey's presentation. Do you consider the support provided by central services, so sort of the research office level, as a natural part of the support and development network for your team?
No, I don't. Not in Oxford.
Okay. Could we, right, now I don't know if people from research services in Oxford are present, but I'd be interested in hearing a bit more about that. Not naming names or anything.
Oh, no, I don't mean it in a bad way. It's just that it feels very removed from what we do. So they probably do, but they support the whole university. So when you say the research services, was that the question, sorry?
Yeah, central services, so the research office and other central departments, I imagine.
Yeah, so everyone has so the reason I say that is they are really far removed. So we don't even interact with them. We go through our own administrative bodies within our own departments and they interact with them. So it's sort of a bit more distant. So that's why I personally would say they probably do contribute. I just don't know how, because it's a step away from what we would see.
Okay, that's very interesting. Thank you. Okay, I think we'll have a couple more questions from Marie and Katie, and we'll do two questions at once. The first is, do you have any quick wins for developing collegiality and research culture? And the second is, if it's a possibly sort of a conservative environment, what challenges did you face in establishing this healthy research ethos? So kind of what are the quick wins can you suggest, and what are perhaps barriers people should look out for?
Quick wins, easy ones. Talk to people. Don't email, don't do anything else. Talk. When you can, obviously, when you can get back in the building, say hello to people, ask them to sit and have a coffee, have an informal chat. It's not when the informal stuff works better than the formal stuff in my book, because you talk to people, and I used to go out and get a cup of tea every Friday afternoon and just say hello to a person that always had their cup of tea then. And one day I said, hi, how's it going? Just as I walked past, like always, and she burst into tears on me. But actually that got her talking, and we managed to get her talking to other people. So I would do informal stuff, talk to people, ask people how they are. I don't think it's hard, and it's sort of common sense what most of us do, but we all get a bit paralleled. And if you're having a bad day, or your experiments aren't working, or you're having challenges, someone else would have had it. I guarantee. They just don't talk about it. And then the other one was for
what challenges might you expect to face if you're establishing these sort of healthy research culture for the team?
Oh, I had a challenge just done before. I was having a cup of tea with our head of department, and I said, oh, I'm doing a talk, and he just sort of looked like, well, what's the problem? But he's not so good at communicating. So I said, well, it's always helpful if we talk clearly to each other. But it's how people have historically been treated are the challenges. So if people have come up in a different way, I didn't come up straight from school and straight through a system, as I showed you. So I guess in a pub, you have to be able to talk to people. You have to be able to say hello. So the challenges are sometimes to get people to believe it was their idea, because they don't like to think it's not their idea. Everyone sits around a table. Everyone knows who I'm talking about. There are situations where it's better if it comes from someone. That's fine. I don't have no problem if it happens. And it's more trying to get people to understand there's a benefit here. If people are happy, they don't want more money. They would like a thank you. They would like to say they've done their job well. I don't know when I was last told I did my job well. So it's small things. The challenges are getting people to acknowledge the good stuff. They're quick enough to point out the negative stuff, like you didn't do that, or you didn't get that paper. But I think the hardest part for me is getting people to say, congratulations on your paper. Doesn't matter what journal, well done on getting the paper, and not follow on by saying, did you know such and such got a higher impact paper? So for me, a win would be just saying, well done to someone, congratulations, good job. Thank you for your contribution.
Well, thank you very much for your contributions. I have lots of good feedback in the chat stream already. That's great. So thank you very much.